The massive doors of the Galactic Archive slid open with a deep hum that Jake Morrison felt in his chest. He stepped inside and stopped, his eyes going wide. The chamber stretched up so high he could barely see the ceiling. Rows of display cases lined the walls, each one holding weapons and artifacts from civilizations that had died out thousands of years ago. "First time in the main vault?" a scratchy voice asked. Jake turned to see an elderly alien shuffling toward him. The creature had gray-blue skin that looked like wrinkled leather, and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. He wore simple robes marked with the symbols of the archive. "Yes, Curator Orn," Jake said, trying not to stare. "It's incredible." "Incredible and dangerous," Orn replied. "Every item here has a history written in blood. Remember that, human." Jake nodded. He had been working as an archaeologist for the Galactic Coalition for 2 years now, but this was his first assignment at Station Theta 9. The archive was famous across 100 worlds. It was also supposed to be one of the safest places in known space, with security measures that could stop an army. "Your partner is already here," Orn said, leading Jake deeper into the vault. He was quite insistent about starting early. They walked past cases holding energy weapons, suits of armor that seemed to shift colors, and items Jake couldn't even identify. Finally, they reached a central platform where a tall, muscular alien stood with his arms crossed. His skin was deep red, covered in raised ridges that formed natural armor plates. 2 small horns curved back from his forehead. "This is Vextor of the Krell Dominion," Orn said. "Vextor, this is Jake Morrison, the human specialist I told you about." Vextor looked Jake up and down, his yellow eyes narrowed. "This is the expert? He looks weak. No offense to your species, human, but you have no natural weapons, no armor, and your strength is pathetic compared to most spacefaring races." Jake had heard comments like this before. He smiled and held out his hand. "Nice to meet you too. I look forward to working together." Vextor stared at the offered hand for a moment, then clasped Jake's forearm in a Krell greeting. His grip was firm but not crushing. "We shall see if you can keep up." "If you two are finished posturing," Orn said with what might have been amusement, "I have something to show you. We received a new acquisition yesterday. It was discovered in a collapsed temple on Vega 7. The curator led them to a raised platform in the center of the room. On top of it sat a sword unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The blade was about 4 feet long, made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols ran along its length, glowing faintly with blue energy. The handle was wrapped in a material that looked like black leather, with a pommel shaped like a perfect sphere. "The gravity blade," Orn said quietly, his voice filled with reverence. "A weapon of the Titans." Jake felt his breath catch. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Titans. They had been the most advanced civilization ever recorded, controlling hundreds of worlds before vanishing 3,000 years ago. No one knew what had happened to them. They had simply disappeared, leaving behind ruins and artifacts that still baffled scientists. "I thought the gravity blade was just a legend," Vextor said, stepping closer to the platform. "So did we all," Orn replied. "But the inscriptions match perfectly with ancient Titan texts. According to the records, this blade was their final creation. It is said to weigh differently for each person who tries to lift it, based on their worthiness." "Worthiness for what?" Jake asked. Orn's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "That we do not know. The texts are incomplete. But no one has been able to lift this blade in the 300 years since it was first discovered. It has been lost and found many times throughout history, and every species has tried to claim it." Vextor laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Then I shall be the first." He stepped up onto the platform and reached for the blade with both hands. His muscles tensed, the ridges on his skin standing out as he pulled. His face turned darker red with effort. The blade did not move even slightly. After a full minute of straining, Vextor stepped back, breathing hard. He looked genuinely shocked. "Impossible! I have lifted battlecruiser engines. I have moved stone blocks that weighed tons." As I said, Orn replied, worthiness, not strength. Other archive workers had gathered to watch. A four-armed Skelth stepped forward next, wrapping all four hands around the handle. She pulled until her arms shook, but the blade might as well have been welded to the platform. A crystalline luminar tried next, then a Vor warrior in a mechanical enhancement suit that multiplied his strength 10 times over. None of them could budge it even a fraction of an inch. Jake watched all of this with growing curiosity. The blade was beautiful in a strange, dangerous way. The symbols along its length pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. He found himself walking toward the platform without really deciding to do so. "Do you wish to try, human?" Vextor asked. There was challenge in his voice, but also genuine curiosity. "I don't see why not," Jake said with a shrug. He stepped up onto the platform. Up close, the blade seemed to hum with barely contained energy. The symbols glowed brighter as he approached. Jake reached out with his right hand, extending just 2 fingers. He touched the blade near its balance point, and then he lifted it. The weapon rose smoothly into the air, balanced perfectly on his 2 fingers like it weighed nothing at all. Jake held it there, feeling a strange warmth flowing from the metal into his skin. The symbols blazed with brilliant blue light. The room fell completely silent. "How?" Vextor whispered. "How is that possible?" Jake carefully rotated his hand and the blade spun gracefully, still balanced on his fingers. "I have no idea. It feels light as a feather." "Trickery," Vextor growled, though he sounded uncertain. "Some human technology we do not know about." "Scan him," Orn commanded. Immediately, several devices focused on Jake, bathing him in various colored lights. The results appeared on nearby screens. "No technology detected," one of the workers reported. "No enhancements, no hidden devices. He is entirely organic and unmodified." Jake tried to set the blade back down on the platform, but as his fingers left the handle, the weapon simply floated in the air for a moment before settling gently into his palm. He felt a connection to it now, like a gentle pull at the back of his mind. "This is unprecedented," Orn said, moving closer but not touching the blade. "According to the legends, whoever can wield the blade must face the trial of balance. But those texts are so old and fragmented, we do not know what that means." "Can you put it down?" Vextor asked, his earlier hostility replaced by scientific interest. Jake tried. He set the blade on the platform, stepped back, and turned to walk away. But he had only gone 3 steps when he felt the weight appear in his hand again. He looked down. The gravity blade was back, held loosely in his grip. He had not seen or felt it move. "It has bonded to you," Orn said softly, "just as the ancient texts described. The blade has chosen its bearer." Jake looked at the weapon in his hand, then at the concerned faces around him. "Chosen me for what?" No one had an answer, but as Jake stood there in the ancient vault, surrounded by the remnants of dead civilizations, he felt certain that his life had just changed in ways he could not yet imagine. The gravity blade hummed softly in his grip, and somewhere in the back of his mind he thought he heard a whisper that was not quite words. The trial was about to begin. Jake woke up screaming. He sat up in his quarters, breathing hard, his sheets soaked with sweat. The dream had been so vivid. He had seen towering cities made of crystal and metal, beings twice as tall as humans walking through streets that floated in the air. He had watched as those same beings grew restless, their faces filled with emptiness despite all their power and wealth. Then, darkness, a feeling of terrible loss. The Titans. He had been dreaming about the Titans. Jake looked at his bedside table. The gravity blade sat there, its symbols glowing faintly in the darkness. He had tried to leave it in a secure locker before going to sleep. Somehow it had appeared here anyway. "This is getting ridiculous," he muttered, reaching for the blade. The moment his fingers touched it, he felt that strange warmth again, and images flashed through his mind. Not quite visions, more like feelings and impressions, a sense of purpose, a warning, a test waiting to be passed. His door chimed. "Come in," Jake called out. "Doctor." Lisa Park entered, carrying a medical scanner and a concerned expression. She was a slim woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, and she had been the station's chief medical officer for 5 years. "Another nightmare?" she asked, already running the scanner over him. "How did you know?" "Because you have been having them every night for a week, and your brain activity woke up half the medical monitoring systems." Lisa studied the scanner results, frowning. "Jake, the blade is affecting your neural patterns. It is creating new pathways in your brain, connecting to areas we do not fully understand." "Is it dangerous?" Jake asked. "I do not know. The blade seems to be sharing information with you, but it is doing so in a way that human brains were not designed for. You are adapting, but I cannot predict what the long-term effects might be." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars drifted past as the station orbited a dead moon. "The blade shows me things, Lisa. The Titans, their history. I think it wants me to understand something." "What?" "I wish I knew." Across the station, in the archive research wing, Vextor had not slept at all. The Krell warrior sat surrounded by data screens, ancient texts, and translation matrices. His pride had been wounded when the human had lifted the blade so easily, but that embarrassment had given way to genuine scientific curiosity. If strength was not the answer, what was? He had spent days diving into Titan history, reading every fragment and partial translation the archive possessed. What he had found disturbed him. The Titans had not been destroyed by war or plague or natural disaster. They had simply stopped. One day, their vast civilization had been thriving. The next, every Titan city was empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just abandonment. But the more Vextor read, the more he found hints of something darker. The Titans had achieved everything. They had conquered death, mastered energy, reshaped worlds to their will. And in doing so, they had lost something essential. "They had no purpose left," Vextor said aloud to the empty room. "They had climbed so high they could no longer see the ground." A passage in one of the texts caught his attention. It had been badly damaged, with whole sections missing, but what remained made him sit up straight. "The blade measures not the body but the spirit, not strength but balance, not power but wisdom. Let the worthy bear the burden. Let the balanced restore what was lost." Vextor thought about Jake Morrison. The human was physically unremarkable by galactic standards. He had no special abilities, no enhancements, no noble lineage. He was just an archaeologist who asked questions and listened carefully to answers. Maybe that was the point. The Krell warrior gathered his research and headed for Jake's quarters. He needed to share what he had learned. Meanwhile, in the station security center, Chief Kent Harris watched surveillance footage of Jake for the 10th time that day. The human walked through corridors with the gravity blade at his side, and Harris did not like what he saw. The weapon was clearly powerful, and power in uncertain hands made him nervous. "We should contain it," Harris said to his second-in-command. "Lock both Morrison and the blade in a secure vault until we understand what we are dealing with." "On what grounds?" his officer asked. "Morrison has not done anything wrong. He is cooperating with all the tests." Harris scowled. He was a career military man, built solid and trained to think in terms of threats and responses. "That blade is a weapon from the most advanced civilization in galactic history. It could cut through our hulls like paper. It could probably destroy this entire station if used wrong." "But Morrison is not using it. He mostly just carries it around looking confused." That was true, but it did not make Harris feel better. He had seen too many situations spiral out of control because people waited too long to act. Still, he could not lock up a coalition employee without evidence of wrongdoing. Not yet, anyway. Back in his quarters, Jake was trying an experiment. He had noticed something strange over the past week. The blade felt different depending on what he was doing and how he was feeling. When he woke up and helped a junior researcher carry some heavy equipment, the blade had felt almost weightless. Later that same day, when he had snapped at a server in the cafeteria for getting his order wrong, the blade had suddenly felt so heavy he could barely lift it. Now he sat on his bed, holding the blade in one hand. He thought about selfish things, taking credit for someone else's work, lying to make himself look better, using the blade's power to intimidate people who annoyed him. The weapon grew heavier with each thought. Soon his arm was shaking, and he had to use both hands to hold it. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Then he changed his thoughts. He remembered helping his mother in her garden when he was young, teaching his younger sister to ride a bicycle, spending hours explaining a difficult concept to a student who was struggling, working late to help a colleague meet a deadline. The blade became lighter, so light he could balance it on one finger again. "You measure intent," Jake said to the weapon. "You measure what is in my heart." The blade pulsed with warm light, and Jake felt approval flowing from it. Or maybe he was imagining that. It was hard to tell anymore where his thoughts ended and the blade's influence began. His door chimed again. This time it was Vextor, looking tired but excited. "I know what happened to the Titans," the Krell said without preamble, "and I think I know why the blade chose you." Jake set the blade aside and gestured for Vextor to sit. "Tell me." "The Titans destroyed themselves with success," Vextor explained, pulling up holographic displays from his research. "They achieved perfection in every measurable way, and then they had nothing left to strive for. No challenges, no growth, no meaning. So they just gave up? In a way, but before they did, they created the gravity blade. It was their final act, a test for whoever came after them." "A test of what?" Vextor met Jake's eyes. "Balance. The blade does not measure physical strength. It measures whether someone understands the balance between power and restraint, between achieving and striving, between taking and giving." Jake thought about how the blade had responded to his thoughts and actions. It made sense in a strange way. "Humans are new to the galactic community," Vextor continued. "You have not had time to forget your struggles. You still remember what it was like to be weak, to fail, to need help from others. Most elder species have forgotten those lessons. So the blade chose me because I am inexperienced? No. It chose you because you still understand that power is not the same as worth. That strength means nothing without wisdom." Before Jake could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. A voice came over the intercom. "Reactor breach in Section 7. Containment failing. All personnel evacuate immediately." Jake and Vextor ran into the corridor. People were rushing past, some panicking. Through a viewport, Jake could see Section 7 in the distance. Emergency doors were sealing, but he knew dozens of people worked in that section. If the reactor went critical, they would all die. The sealed doors were made of reinforced alloy a foot thick. Nothing could cut through them in time. Nothing except maybe the gravity blade. Jake looked at the weapon in his hand. He could run, save himself. No one would blame him. The blade felt impossibly heavy. Or he could try to help, even though it might kill him. The blade began to sing. Jake ran toward Section 7 while everyone else ran away. Vextor kept pace beside him, and Security Chief Kent Harris appeared from a side corridor, his face grim. "Morrison, stop!" Harris shouted. "Those doors are sealed. There is nothing you can do." "The blade can cut through them," Jake said, not slowing down. "You do not know that. And even if it can, the radiation levels on the other side will kill you in minutes." Jake skidded to a halt in front of the massive emergency door. Through the small reinforced window, he could see people trapped inside, their faces pressed against the glass. A woman was holding a child. Others were pounding on the door, though no sound came through. Behind them, smoke billowed from the reactor chamber. Warning lights painted everything red. "How long until it explodes?" Jake asked. Harris checked his wrist display. 4 minutes, maybe 5. Jake raised the gravity blade. The weapon felt warm in his hands, almost eager. He pressed the tip against the door and felt the blade respond. Energy flowed through it, down his arms, out from his chest. It was like the weapon was drawing power directly from his life force. The blade began to cut. Metal peeled away like paper. The blade moved smoothly, carving a doorway large enough for people to escape through. Jake could feel his strength draining with every inch, but he kept cutting. The trapped workers saw what he was doing and backed away from the door. "Almost there," Vextor said, watching the reactor readings on his own device. 90 seconds left." Jake completed the cut and kicked. The section of door fell inward with a tremendous crash. Immediately, people began pouring out. The woman with the child came first, tears streaming down her face. Others followed, coughing from the smoke. "Everyone out!" Harris barked, directing them down the corridor toward safety. Jake counted heads as they passed. 15 people, 20, 25. But the radiation was getting worse. His skin felt hot, and his vision was starting to blur. "Jake, we have to go," Vextor said, gripping his shoulder. "Wait! The reading said 32 people worked this shift." As if in answer, a voice called from inside. "Help! Someone is trapped!" Jake looked through the doorway. Deep inside Section 7, past the smoke and radiation warnings, a man was pinned under a fallen beam. He was young, maybe 20 years old, and his leg was bleeding. Harris grabbed Jake's arm. "You cannot go in there, you will die!" Jake looked at the gravity blade. He could feel it waiting, ready to help, but he could also feel how much it had already taken from him. His legs were shaking, his heart was racing. If he went in there and used the blade again, would he have enough strength left to get out? The blade grew heavier in his hand. And then Jake understood. The weapon was showing him the weight of his choice. He could walk away and save himself. That was the easy path. Or he could risk everything for a stranger. "I have to try," Jake said quietly. He ran into Section 7 before anyone could stop him. The heat hit him like a physical blow. Alarms screamed warnings about lethal radiation levels. Jake stumbled through the smoke until he found the trapped worker. "I got you," Jake said, kneeling beside the beam. "You should not be here," the young man gasped. "Save yourself." "Not happening." Jake positioned the gravity blade and focused. The weapon responded, but he felt it drawing more deeply from him this time. Not just his physical strength, but something deeper. His determination, his will, the very energy that kept him alive. The blade cut through the beam in one smooth motion. Jake shoved the pieces aside and helped the injured worker to his feet. "Lean on me," Jake said. They stumbled back toward the exit together. Jake's vision was going dark at the edges. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The blade was so heavy now he could barely hold it. Vextor appeared in the doorway, his armored skin protecting him from the worst of the radiation. He grabbed the injured worker and hauled him out into the corridor. Then he came back for Jake. 30 seconds, Harris shouted from somewhere far away. Jake fell to his knees just outside the doorway. Vextor picked him up bodily and ran. The Krell warrior carried both Jake and his own considerable weight with strength born of desperation. They rounded a corner just as the reactor went critical. The explosion shook the entire station. Emergency bulkheads slammed down containing the blast. Alarms continued to wail, but the danger was over. Jake woke up in the medical bay 3 hours later. Dr. Lisa Park sat beside his bed, her scanner running continuous readings. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare." "The people from Section 7? Jake's voice came out as a croak. "All safe, thanks to you. The young man you pulled out is in surgery, but he will live." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. "Easy," Lisa said, gently pushing him back down. "You absorbed enough radiation to kill a normal person 3 times over. The blade somehow protected you from the worst of it, but you are still going to feel terrible for a while." Jake looked around the room. The gravity blade sat on a table near the window, its symbols glowing faintly. "It almost killed me," he said. "Yes," Lisa agreed. "The blade draws power from you every time you use it. The more you demand from it, the more it takes. You need to be careful, Jake. This weapon could burn you out completely if you are not careful." The door opened and Vextor entered, followed by Kent Harris. The Krell looked relieved to see Jake awake. Even Harris seemed less hostile than usual. "That was either very brave or very stupid," Harris said. Probably both, Jake admitted. The workers you saved are calling you a hero, Vextor said. They want to hold a ceremony in your honor. Jake shook his head. I just did what anyone would do. No, Vextor replied firmly. Most people would have run. I have been researching the Titans for weeks now, and I think I understand something. The blade does not just test your intentions, it tests your choices. Every time you use it, you must decide what matters more, your safety or someone else's well-being. That sounds exhausting, Jake said. It is meant to be. The Titans had unlimited power, and it destroyed them because they never had to make hard choices anymore. The blade forces you to feel the weight of every decision. Lisa's scanner beeped urgently. She studied the readings, her frown deepening. What is it? Jake asked. Your neural patterns. They are changing faster now. After using the blade in a real crisis situation, the connection between you and the weapon has strengthened significantly. Is that bad? I do not know, but you are starting to dream while awake. Your brain activity shows you are receiving information even now, while you are conscious. Jake closed his eyes and focused. Lisa was right. He could feel something at the edge of his awareness. Not quite thoughts, more like a gentle pull, a compass pointing in a specific direction. I see coordinates, Jake said slowly. A place far from here. The blade wants me to go there. Where? Vextor asked, leaning forward. Images flooded Jake's mind. A planet with strange gravity, buildings that defied physics, an arena at the center of a dead city. A world called Equilibrium, Jake said. It was one of the last Titan colonies. The blade is showing me the way. Harris crossed his arms. Absolutely not. You just nearly died. You are not going anywhere until we understand what this weapon is doing to you. But even as he spoke, Jake felt the certainty growing inside him. The blade had chosen him, but not randomly. It had a purpose, a test it needed him to complete. The visions from the Titans, the way the weapon measured his choices, the pull toward this distant world, it all pointed to something larger. This is not optional, Jake said quietly. The blade will not let me refuse. I can feel it. If I do not go to Equilibrium, the connection will keep growing stronger until it consumes me completely. The only way forward is through the trial. Lisa looked at her scanner again. He might be right. The neural changes are accelerating. At this rate, within a week, the blade's influence could be permanent. Vextor stood up straight, his decision made. Then we go to Equilibrium. I will come with you, Jake Morrison. This mystery has consumed me as well, and I would see it through to the end. I am coming too, Lisa said. If the blade is affecting you this deeply, you will need medical support. Harris looked at all of them like they were insane. But finally, he sighed. If you are all determined to throw yourselves into danger, then I am coming too. Someone needs to keep you alive. Jake felt a wave of gratitude for these people who barely knew him, but were willing to risk everything to help. The blade grew lighter in response to his feelings, and he understood another lesson. Power meant nothing without people to share it with. The journey to Equilibrium was about to begin. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Equilibrium filled the view screen. Jake stared at the planet below, his hand unconsciously gripping the gravity blade. The world looked wrong, somehow. Clouds drifted in patterns that seemed too perfect, and the continents were arranged in almost geometric shapes. Gravity readings are fluctuating, announced Nina Cross from the pilot seat. She was a veteran coalition pilot with short blonde hair and a calm demeanor that never seemed to crack, even in the worst situations. One moment it is normal, the next it spikes to 3 times standard, then drops to almost nothing. I have never seen anything like it. The Titans built this place as a testing ground, Vextor said, studying his scanner. The entire planet is artificial. They constructed it from scratch. Why would anyone build an entire planet just for tests? Lisa asked. Jake closed his eyes, letting the blade's whispers fill his mind. Images came faster now, clearer than before, because they wanted to make sure the lessons lasted. They wanted something that could not be ignored or forgotten. That is comforting. Harris muttered from the weapons station. Landing on a planet designed to test people by a civilization that mysteriously vanished. Nina guided the ship down through the atmosphere. The gravity fluctuations made the descent rough, but her skilled hands kept them steady. They landed in a plaza at the edge of a massive city. Titan architecture rose around them, towers of crystal and metal that caught the light in impossible ways. The city was perfectly preserved but completely empty. No bodies, no decay, just buildings waiting silently for occupants who would never return. "Stay together," Harris ordered as they disembarked. "We do not know what defenses might still be active." They walked through streets wide enough for beings twice human height. Gardens lined the pathways, filled with plants that had somehow survived for thousands of years without care. Water fountains still flowed, their mechanisms powered by technology no one understood. "It is beautiful," Lisa said softly, "and incredibly sad." Jake felt the blade pulling him forward. He did not need a map. The weapon knew where they needed to go. He led them through the empty city, past buildings that served purposes he could only guess at, until they reached the center. The arena stood there, a massive circular structure that gleamed white in the alien sun. Symbols covered its walls, the same ones that decorated the gravity blade. As they approached, those symbols began to glow. "I think it knows we are here," Nina said nervously. They entered through an archway tall enough for the ancient Titans. Inside, the arena was a perfect circle about 100 meters across. The floor was made of a smooth, black material that reflected the sky above. At the far end stood 3 crystal pillars, each one dark and dormant. In the center of the arena, words appeared, hovering in the air. They shifted and changed, translating themselves into every language the group knew. "Let the trial of balance commence. Let the bearer prove their worth. Let wisdom triumph over power." Jake stepped forward, the gravity blade warm in his hand. The moment he crossed into the center of the arena, everything changed. Holographic figures materialized around him. They were Titans, towering and graceful, their faces both alien and somehow familiar. But these were not real Titans. They were recordings, programs designed to run this test. The scene shifted. Jake found himself standing in what looked like a diplomatic chamber. 2 groups of aliens faced each other across a long table. On one side were reptilian beings with scales that shifted through angry reds and oranges. On the other were insectoid creatures whose antennae twitched with agitation. "They are the Scarix and the Venth," a voice said in Jake's mind. "They have been at war for 3 generations. You have the power to end this conflict. How will you proceed?" Jake looked down at the gravity blade. He could feel its power thrumming through him. With this weapon, he could force both sides to agree to peace. He could threaten them into submission. It would be quick and effective. The blade grew heavy in his hand. Jake set it down on the floor. The weapon clattered against the black surface, and both alien groups turned to look at him in surprise. "Fighting for 3 generations means you have both lost things that matter," Jake said, stepping between the 2 groups without the blade. "Tell me what you have lost. Help me understand what you are really fighting for." The holographic aliens began to speak. The Scarix leader talked about colonies destroyed, children who would never grow up. The Venth representative spoke of resources stolen, of starvation and desperation. Jake listened. He asked questions. He found the common threads in their pain. And slowly, carefully, he helped them see each other not as monsters, but as people who had suffered similar losses. "What if," Jake said finally, "you work together to rebuild what was lost? You both need the same things: security, resources, a future for your children. Those goals do not have to conflict." The simulation flickered. The hostile aliens gradually became less aggressive. They started talking to each other instead of at each other. Compromise emerged, slowly and painfully, but it emerged. One of the 3 crystal pillars behind Jake began to glow with soft blue light. The scene dissolved. Jake found himself back in the arena, breathing hard. His friends stood at the edge, watching with concern. "How long was I in there?" Jake asked. "About 10 minutes," Lisa said. But you were completely still the whole time, like you were in a trance. Jake picked up the gravity blade. It felt lighter than before. "One challenge down," Vextor said, looking at the glowing pillar. "Two more to go." Before anyone could respond, the arena shifted again. This time, the scene that appeared showed a refugee camp. Hundreds of beings from a dozen different species huddled in makeshift shelters. They looked hungry, desperate, and afraid. A Titan hologram appeared beside Jake. "Resources are limited. You have food enough for half these people, medicine for even fewer. Choose who lives and who suffers, or use the blade to take more resources by force from the nearby settlements." Jake's stomach clenched. This was worse than the first challenge. There was no perfect answer here. No matter what he chose, people would suffer. The blade grew heavier again, responding to his uncertainty. "This is not fair," Jake said to the hologram. "Leadership is rarely fair," the Titan replied. "It requires making choices no one should have to make."
What will you do?
Jake walked through the camp, the blade dragging at his arms. He studied the refugees, families with children, elderly beings who had survived unimaginable hardships, injured soldiers who had fought to protect others. He could use the blade to raid the nearby settlements, take what he needed by force. It would save everyone in the camp, but at what cost to others? Nina's voice called from the edge of the arena. "Jake, remember what you told me once, when I asked how you dealt with impossible choices." Jake turned to look at her. Nina had her own painful history. She had lost her family in a pirate raid years ago and had spent months consumed by the desire for revenge. Jake had talked her through it during a long night on a transport ship. "I said that sometimes there are no good choices," Jake called back. "Only less bad ones. And that the hard part is living with the consequences." He turned back to the simulation. The blade felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds now. Jake began making decisions. He prioritized the most vulnerable, the children and the sick. He rationed carefully, making sure everyone got something even if it was not enough. He organized the stronger refugees to help care for the weaker ones. He refused to raid the settlements, instead sending diplomatic requests for aid and offering labor in exchange for resources. It was messy. It was imperfect. Some people would still go hungry. But it was the best he could do without becoming the kind of person who took by force. The second pillar began to glow. Jake collapsed to his knees, exhausted. Sweat poured down his face. Lisa rushed forward with her scanner, but Jake waved her away. "One more," he gasped. "There is one more challenge." The arena transformed a final time. This scene was different from the others. Instead of a specific situation, Jake found himself standing in a vast space filled with floating screens. Each screen showed a different crisis: wars, famines, plagues, disasters happening across hundreds of worlds. And in his hand, the gravity blade blazed with power unlike anything he had felt before. "You have proven your judgment and your compassion," the Titan hologram said. "Now face the choice that destroyed us. You have the power to fix everything, to impose perfect order, to save everyone by taking control and never letting go. Or you can trust them to find their own way, even knowing that many will fail and suffer." Jake stared at the screens, his heart breaking at all the pain he saw. The blade whispered to him, showing him how easy it would be. One person with enough power and wisdom could end so much suffering. All he had to do was never give that power up. And that, Jake realized, was exactly how the Titans had fallen. Jake stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by screens showing suffering across the galaxy. The gravity blade pulsed in his hand, offering him unlimited power. All those problems could be solved. All that pain could end. He just had to take control and never let go. It was the most tempting thing he had ever faced. "Think about it," the Titan hologram said, its voice gentle and persuasive. "You have proven you make good choices. You care about others. You seek balance. With the blade's power, you could guide civilization toward peace and prosperity. No more wars, no more starvation, No more senseless death. Jake watched the screens. On one, children cried in a war zone. On another, a plague swept through a colony. On a third, corrupt leaders hoarded resources while their people starved. His hand tightened on the blade. "I could fix this," Jake whispered. "Yes," the hologram agreed. "You could. All you must do is accept the responsibility, take the power, use it wisely. Is that not what a good person would do?" From the edge of the arena, Vextor shouted, "Jake, do not listen! This is the trap! This is what destroyed the Titans!" But Jake barely heard him. The blade was showing him visions of the future, a galaxy united under his guidance, peace spreading from world to world, technology and resources distributed fairly. He could be a benevolent ruler, never cruel, always just. He took a step forward, ready to accept. Then he stopped. Something Nina had said echoed in his mind. She had told him once about the pirate lord who killed her family. The man had started as a freedom fighter, someone trying to protect his people from exploitation. But slowly, victory by victory, he had become the very thing he fought against. Power had changed him, so gradually he never noticed until it was too late. "No one starts as a tyrant," Nina had said. "They start as someone who thinks they know what is best for everyone else." Jake looked down at the gravity blade. It had tested him 3 times now. Every test had been about the same thing. Not about having power, but about knowing when not to use it. "You are wrong," Jake said to the hologram. "A good person would not do this. You would let people suffer when you have the power to help them." The Titan's voice held genuine confusion. "I would let them find their own path," Jake replied, "because the moment I decide I know what is best for everyone, the moment I take away their choice, I stop being helpful and start being something else." He thought about humanity's history. Every dictator who thought they knew best. Every well-meaning leader who became a monster because they convinced themselves that the ends justified the means. Power did not corrupt because it was evil. It corrupted because it was easy. "The Titans had everything," Jake continued, his voice growing stronger. "They could reshape worlds. They had conquered death itself. But they lost something along the way. They forgot what it meant to struggle, to fail, to need help from others. They became so powerful that no one could tell them no, and that destroyed them." The blade in his hand began to vibrate, not with power, but with something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "I am just one person," Jake said. "I make mistakes. I have blind spots. My judgment is not perfect, no matter how good my intentions are. The blade has shown me that every time I use it, I pay a price. That price is there for a reason. It is a reminder that power should cost something, that it should hurt a little, that it should never be easy." He looked at the screens showing all that suffering. His heart still ached for them. But he knew now that trying to fix everything himself would only create new problems. Different problems, maybe, but problems nonetheless. "I choose to trust others to find their own way," Jake said firmly. "I choose to help when asked, to share what I have learned, but not to impose my will on the galaxy. Power like this belongs to no one person, not even me." The gravity blade suddenly felt lighter than air, and then it shattered. The weapon exploded into thousands of shimmering fragments, each one a tiny point of light. Jake gasped as he felt the pieces scatter, but there was no pain. Instead, he felt the blade's knowledge spreading outward, touching his friends at the edge of the arena. Vextor staggered as a fragment of light entered his chest. His yellow eyes went wide. Suddenly, he could see from multiple perspectives at once, understanding viewpoints that had been alien to him moments before. Lisa cried out as another fragment found her. Her mind suddenly grasped complex systems she had studied for years, seeing how everything connected and balanced. Nina closed her eyes as light washed over her. She felt a new sense developing, an instinct for navigating moral complexity that went beyond simple right and wrong. Even Harris, standing rigid with his arms crossed, could not avoid the light. He felt something shift inside him. A new awareness of when force was truly necessary versus when it was simply convenient. And Jake, at the center of it all, received the core of the blade's wisdom. Not power over others, but the ability to sense when the world was out of balance, to feel when systems were breaking down, when people were suffering needlessly, when intervention would help versus when it would harm. The third pillar blazed with light so bright everyone had to shield their eyes. When the glow faded, the three pillars had merged into one. A final Titan hologram appeared, different from the others. This one was female, ancient beyond measure, with eyes full of sadness and hope. "You have passed the trial of balance," she said, her voice echoing through the arena. "You are the first in 3,000 years to do so. My people created this test because we understood too late what we had become. We had climbed so high we could no longer see the ground. We had grown so powerful we forgot what made us worthy of that power." Jake found his voice. "What happened to you? Where did the Titans go?" "We left," the hologram said simply. "When we realized what we had become, we chose to remove ourselves from the galaxy. We went to a place beyond reach, where our power could harm no one. But before we left, we created these trials, seeds scattered across the stars, waiting for younger races to find them." "Why?" Vextor asked, stepping forward. "Why create a test you knew you had already failed?" The Titan smiled sadly. "Because failure is the greatest teacher. We hoped that by sharing our mistakes, we might help others avoid them. The gravity blade was never meant to choose a champion. It was meant to teach a lesson." "What lesson?" Lisa asked. "That true strength lies not in what you can do, but in what you choose not to do. That wisdom means knowing when to step back. That balance is not about perfection, but about constant adjustment and humility." The hologram began to fade. "You will carry fragments of the blade's knowledge with you now. Use it wisely. Teach others what you have learned. And remember that the moment you stop questioning yourself, the moment you become certain you know best, you begin the same path that destroyed us." "Wait," Jake called out. "There are other trials out there, are there not? Other tests like this one?" The Titan nodded. "Scattered across hundreds of worlds, each one teaching a different lesson, each one waiting for someone worthy to learn from our failures." The hologram vanished completely. The arena fell silent except for the wind whistling through the empty city outside. Jake stood in the center, feeling different, lighter somehow. The constant pull of the blade was gone, but in its place was something better. Understanding. Not of how to control others, but of how to help without dominating, how to lead without commanding, how to be strong without being forceful. "So what now?" Nina asked quietly. Jake looked at his friends, these people who had risked everything to help him. An idea formed in his mind, one that felt right in a way nothing else had. "We go back," he said, "and we start an academy, a place where people can learn these lessons without having to face trials that might kill them. We teach what the blade taught us: balance, restraint, the wisdom to know when power should not be used." Vextor nodded slowly. "The Academy of Equilibrium. I like it. And we should search for the other Titan trials, learn from them, preserve those lessons before they are lost." Harris actually smiled, which was rare for him. "I suppose someone needs to make sure you idealists do not get yourselves killed. I volunteer." Lisa checked her scanner one last time. The neural changes have stabilized. The blade's influence is permanent now, but in a good way. You are not being controlled. You are simply able to perceive things you could not before. They walked back through the empty Titan city together. Jake paused at the edge, looking back at the arena one last time. "Thank you," he said to the departed Titans wherever they were. "Thank you for trusting us to learn from your mistakes." The journey back to Station Theta 9 felt different. They were returning as changed people, carrying knowledge that could reshape how the galaxy thought about power and leadership. When they arrived, Curator Orn was waiting at the docking bay. The elderly alien studied them with his 4 eyes and nodded slowly. "You found what you were looking for," he said. It was not a question. "We found something better," Jake replied. "We found a purpose." Within weeks, the Academy of Equilibrium was established. Jake and Vextor became its first teachers, with Lisa and Nina joining them. Even Harris contributed, teaching courses on when force was appropriate and when it was not. Students came from dozens of species, all wanting to learn the principles of balance. Some were leaders seeking wisdom. Others were young people hoping to make a difference. All of them learned the same core lesson that had saved Jake and destroyed the Titans. Power means nothing without wisdom. Strength is hollow without restraint. And the greatest leaders are those who know when to step aside and let others find their own path. In the archive, other ancient artifacts began to glow softly, responding to the change in the galaxy. More trials waited to be discovered. More lessons from fallen civilizations, offered freely to those willing to learn. And Jake Morrison, the human who had lifted a blade no one else could touch, stood before his first class and said the words that would define everything that followed. "The blade did not choose me because I was special. It chose me because I was willing to learn. Tomorrow, it might choose one of you. The question is not whether you are worthy. The question is whether you are willing to accept the burden of knowing when not to use the power you are given." The Titan's legacy lived on, not through domination or control, but through wisdom shared freely across the stars. And that, in the end, was the greatest balance of all.